You are a demon. Year-old boy sentenced to 435 years in prison for killing and eating his mother. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The Millbrook County Courthouse had never seen such a crowd. Every bench was filled with people standing against the walls, their faces a mixture of horror, fascination, and disgust. Outside, news vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the gray Ohio sky like metal flowers searching for sunlight. Eleanor Walsh adjusted her glasses and shifted uncomfortably on the hard wooden bench. After 20 years as a journalist, she thought she'd seen it all. War zones, natural disasters, political scandals. But nothing had prepared her for this. A 9-year-old boy on trial for murdering and allegedly cannibalizing his own mother. Tommy Pearson sat at the defense table, his feet dangling above the floor, small hands folded neatly in his lap. The bright orange jumpsuit hung from his narrow shoulders, making him look even smaller, more fragile. His face betrayed no emotion, not fear, not anger, not sadness, just emptiness. The evidence is overwhelming, the prosecutor announced, his voice cutting through the hushed courtroom. Blood-soaked clothing, fingerprints on the knife, and most damning of all, ladies and gentlemen, a full confession. Eleanor watched the jury's faces harden. She'd seen that look before, minds already made up, justice merely a formality. But something wasn't right. The boy's stillness seemed unnatural. Not the calm of a psychopath, but something else entirely. The defendant admitted to authorities that he waited until his mother, Veronica Pearson, was asleep before attacking her with a kitchen knife. The prosecutor continued. He then proceeded to, "Objection!" The defense attorney interrupted weakly. "Prejudicial." The judge nodded. "Sustained. The jury will disregard." But Eleanor knew they wouldn't. Some bells couldn't be unrung. She glanced at her notebook. The details didn't add up. The timeline seemed compressed. The investigation rushed. The confession, obtained after hours of questioning without a guardian present, felt too perfect, too complete. When court adjourned for the day, Eleanor slipped past the crowd toward Sheriff Frank Caldwell, a square-jawed man with 20 years on the force, and cold, evaluating eyes. "Sheriff, Eleanor Walsh from the Tribune. Could I ask a few questions about—" "Everything's in my statement," he said dismissively. "Yes, but the timeline seems—" Caldwell's face hardened. "Listen, Walsh, this isn't some political corruption story. It's open and shut. That boy in there is a monster wearing a child's skin. The confession matches the evidence. End of story." As he walked away, Eleanor noticed Dr. Mitchell, the court-appointed child psychiatrist, watching their exchange. Their eyes met briefly before he looked away, his expression troubled. Back at the Tribune, Eleanor's editor leaned against her desk, arms crossed. "Tell me you're not thinking what I think you're thinking. Something's wrong with this case, Phil. Every reporter in the state is running with the cannibal boy angle. It's selling papers." Eleanor stared at the preliminary case. Notes she'd gathered. What if he didn't do it? The boy confessed, Ellie. 9-year-olds confess to stealing cookies, not to murder. Phil sighed. "Drop it. This isn't our kind of story." But as Eleanor drove home that night, the image of Tommy's empty eyes haunted her. Not the eyes of a killer, but of a child drowning in something he couldn't understand. Despite her editor's warning, she made a decision. She would investigate the case independently. Because when a town is too eager to believe a child capable of the unimaginable, somebody needs to ask why. What she couldn't know was that this decision would unravel a conspiracy that reached far beyond a small-town murder, one that powerful people would kill to protect. Eleanor drove through Millbrook's residential streets, past neat houses with American flags and winter bear gardens. This town of 12,000 souls was typical small-town Ohio, built on manufacturing, sustained by community, and defined by the kind of closeness where everyone knew everyone else's business, or thought they did. She pulled up to Oakwood Elementary School. Children's artwork decorated the windows, including a construction paper turkey with "Thankful" for family written across it in a child's unsteady hand. The irony wasn't lost on her. Mrs. Harmon, Tommy's fourth-grade teacher, was grading papers when Eleanor entered her classroom. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a cardigan dotted with apple pins. Tommy was different, she said, choosing her words carefully. Quiet, creative. His artwork was always so detailed. She pulled out a folder of drawings, landscapes, animals, buildings with intricate designs, not the work of a disturbed mind. Was he violent? Troubled? Mrs. Harmon shook her head emphatically. Never, he flinched. At loud noises, avoided conflicts. The idea that he could... Her voice trailed off. I've been teaching for 30 years, Ms. Walsh. I've seen troubled children. Tommy wasn't one of them. Next, Eleanor visited the Pearson home, a modest two-bedroom house now surrounded by police tape. Neighbors had created a makeshift memorial on the sidewalk. Flowers, candles, a teddy bear. She approached a woman watching from her porch across the street. They kept to themselves, the woman said, clutching her sweater tightly. Veronica worked long hours. The boy was alone a lot. She lowered her voice. There were arguments sometimes. A man would visit. Never the same car twice. Did you tell the police? They weren't interested. They had their killer. At the sheriff's office, Eleanor was surprised when Caldwell agreed to see her, though his hospitality had clear limits. 10 minutes, he said. Sliding a thin folder across his desk. These are the public case files, nothing that would compromise the investigation. Eleanor flipped through the pages quickly, noting several were heavily redacted, others seemingly missing. Sheriff, the confession transcript, not public record during an ongoing case. The medical examiner's report says, I know what it says. Caldwell's expression darkened. Look, I get it. Hard to believe a kid could do this. Truth is, sometimes evil comes in small packages. Something in his certainty felt rehearsed. Later that afternoon, Eleanor met Dr. A. Mitchell at a coffee shop 2 towns over, at his insistence. The psychiatrist looked nervous, glancing around constantly. Tommy's psychological profile doesn't match his confession, he said quietly. His responses show confusion, not callousness. It's like, he hesitated, like what? Like he's protecting someone. Dr. Mitchell reached into his pocket, appearing ready to hand her something, then suddenly withdrew his hand, eyes darting to a man who had just entered. I shouldn't be talking to you. Dr. Mitchell, if you know something, they're watching me. He stood abruptly. Tommy, isn't what they're saying. But be careful who you trust, Ms. Walsh. This isn't just about a murder anymore. As he hurried away, Eleanor noticed a business card had fallen from his pocket. On the back, hastily scrawled, Check Veronica's workplace, Westfield Industries. That evening, Eleanor researched Westfield Industries, the county's largest employer, manufacturing electrical components for defense contracts. CEO Harrison Westfield was a major donor to Governor Phillips's campaign, and Veronica Pearson had worked in their accounting department. As Eleanor connected these dots in her apartment, her phone rang. Eleanor Walsh, she answered. Leave it alone. The voice was distorted. The boy confessed. Story over. Who is this? The line went dead. Eleanor stared at her notes spread across the table, heart racing. She was onto something worth threatening her over. And if they were trying to scare her away, that meant Tommy Pearson might be exactly what his teacher believed. Not a monster, but a child caught in something far beyond his understanding. What Eleanor didn't know yet was just how deep the conspiracy went, or that Veronica Pearson had been preparing to expose it all just before her death. The Westfield Industries complex dominated Millbrook's eastern edge, a sprawling collection of buildings behind security gates, employing nearly a third of the town's workforce. Eleanor pulled into the visitor's lot, adjusting her press badge and rehearsing her cover story, a profile on local businesses supporting the community. The receptionist's smile tightened when Eleanor mentioned Veronica Pearson. Such a tragedy, she said, her tone carefully neutral. Everyone here was shocked. I understand she worked in accounting? You'd have to speak with HR. About employees. The phone on her desk rang. Excuse me, she answered, speaking in hushed tones, eyes flicking toward Eleanor. While waiting, Eleanor studied the lobby's wall of photos. Harrison Westfield shaking hands with politicians, accepting awards, cutting ribbons at charity events. A man accustomed to power, with the governor's arm around his shoulder in 3 separate photos. Ms. Walsh, a woman in a crisp suit, approached. I'm Diane Mercer, HR Director. I understand you're asking about Veronica? Diane led Eleanor to a small conference room, her demeanor professional but guarded. Yes, Veronica had been a valued employee for 7 years. No, there had been no behavioral issues. Yes, it was all terribly shocking. Was she working on anything unusual before her death? Eleanor asked casually. Diane hesitated fractionally. Just routine accounting, quarterly reports. Could I speak with her colleagues? They're understandably upset. Company policy during an ongoing investigation. Of course, Eleanor interrupted. What about her office? Computer? Police took her work computer. Standard procedure. Diane stood. I'm afraid I have another meeting. As they walked out, a young woman at a cubicle caught Eleanor's eye, giving her a meaningful look. In the parking lot, Eleanor found a note tucked under her windshield wiper. Garden Terrace, Public Library, 2 p.m. The woman from accounting, Melissa, wrung her hands nervously as she spoke. Veronica found something in the books. She was staying late, working weekends. She told me it was... Melissa lowered her voice. Creative accounting. Big money moving offshore. Did she report it? She was gathering proof. Said she wanted everything solid before going to the authorities. Melissa's eyes welled with tears. 2 weeks before she died, someone accessed her computer after hours. The next day, she started acting paranoid, checking her car before getting in, looking over her shoulder. Did she mention any names? She said it went all the way up. I assumed she meant Westfield, but Melissa, swallowed hard. The day before she died, she told me she was meeting someone who could help. Said if anything happened to her, check the fireplace. Eleanor's heart pounded. Why haven't you told the police? You don't understand. Westfield owns this town. Sheriff Caldwell used to be Westfield's head of security. The mayor's brother-in-law is Westfield's lawyer. Melissa stood abruptly. I shouldn't be talking to you. I need this job. That evening, Eleanor drove by Veronica's house. Police tape still blocked the entrance, but the backyard was accessible. Waiting until dark, she slipped behind the house, using her phone's flashlight to find a window with a broken latch, something the police had overlooked. The house was eerily silent, furniture still in place, dishes in the sink. In the living room, Eleanor knelt by the fireplace. Using a pen, she carefully sifted through the ashes, finding fragments of burned paper. Most were unreadable, but one partially intact corner bore the unmistakable letterhead of the governor's campaign fund, alongside what appeared to be a series of account numbers. Her phone rang, startling her. An unknown number. You're trespassing on a crime scene, a man's voice said coldly. Eleanor froze. Who is this? Stop digging your career's grave. The line went dead. Heart racing, she slipped back out the window, only to see headlights approaching slowly down the street. She ducked behind a shrub as a car drove past. Not police, but a black sedan with tinted windows. Back in her apartment, Eleanor was startled by a knock at the door. Hand hovering over her phone, ready to call 911, she peered through the peephole. A man she'd never seen before stood there, exhaustion etched on his face. My name is Robert Pearson, he said when she cracked the door. Veronica was my sister, and I don't believe my nephew killed her. Eleanor's investigation had just gained an ally, one with a personal stake in finding the truth. What she didn't know was how much danger this connection would bring, or that Robert carried a secret that would change everything they thought they knew about Tommy. Robert Pearson looked nothing like his sister. Where Veronica had been petite with delicate features, her brother was tall and broad-shouldered, with weathered hands that spoke of physical labor, but their eyes were identical, the same deep brown that Tommy had inherited. I live in Cincinnati, Robert explained, sitting at Eleanor's kitchen table. Drove up as soon as I heard. They won't let me see Tommy. Not in his best interest, they said. The court appointed a guardian. The state took custody. Said I need to petition the family court, but that could take months. His knuckles whitened around his coffee mug. He's just a little boy, alone and scared. Eleanor spread her case notes across the table. The prosecutor's case relies on three things: Tommy's bloody clothes, his fingerprints on the knife, and his confession. Tommy would never hurt Veronica. They were inseparable. Tell me about the confession. Robert's expression darkened. 6 hours they questioned him. No lawyer, no family present, just a 9-year-old boy and 3 police officers. 6 hours. Eleanor frowned. That's not in the, official report. The intake officer at the juvenile facility told me. Said Tommy was practically catatonic when they brought him in. The next morning, Eleanor met with David Chen, a forensic journalist colleague who specialized in police procedurals. The timeline doesn't add up, she told him, spreading the medical examiner's report on the table between them. According to this, Veronica died between 2 and 4 p.m., but school records show Tommy was in class until 3:15 and the after-school program until 5. David studied the report. Who found the body? A neighbor checking on Veronica when she didn't show up for their book club around 8 p.m. What does the autopsy say about stomach contents? Eleanor flipped through her notes. Partially digested lunch, sandwich, apple, consistent with a mid-afternoon meal. David nodded thoughtfully. So Veronica was killed hours before Tommy could have been home. Exactly. But when I questioned this, the ME suddenly amended the report. Eleanor pulled out the updated document. Now it says she died between 5 and 7 p.m. That's convenient. It's not an error, David. It's deliberate manipulation. Eleanor lowered her voice. The medical examiner who signed this is suddenly on personal leave. Armed with this discrepancy, Eleanor visited the district attorney's office. The receptionist directed her to Assistant DA James Morris, a young man with ambition written across his pressed suit and careful hair. The time of death was revised based on additional findings, Morris said dismissively. It happens. What about the blood evidence? The report says blood-soaked clothing, but doesn't detail the blood spatter analysis. Morris shuffled papers uncomfortably. That's confidential during an ongoing case. Is that why Tommy's defense attorney hasn't requested it? Because Logan Peters seems strangely uninterested in challenging your evidence. Morris's smile tightened. Peters is doing his job. The evidence speaks for itself. Does it? Eleanor leaned forward. What about the security camera across the street? The one facing the Pearson home? Morris's expression flickered. What camera? That afternoon, Eleanor tracked down Mr. Gunderson, the retired neighbor whose hobby was security. His house bristled with cameras. Keeping the neighborhood safe, he explained proudly. I already gave the footage to the police, he said, inviting her in. But I always keep backups. On his computer, he pulled up footage from the day of the murder. At 2:37 p.m., a dark sedan with tinted windows parked across from the Pearson house. A man in a suit entered the front door, not breaking in but using a key. Veronica? Never mentioned a boyfriend, Eleanor murmured. That's the strange part, Gunderson said. When the police came for the footage, they only took from 5 p.m. onward. Never asked about earlier. Did you tell them about this visitor? Of course. Sheriff Caldwell said they'd look into it. Never heard. Back. Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Court hearing tomorrow. Emergency motion to review evidence. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. The pieces weren't fitting. A rushed investigation. Evidence overlooked. A confession from a child after hours of questioning. A medical report. Conveniently adjusted. Her phone rang at 1 a.m. David Chen. I had a contact at the crime lab check the knife, he said without preamble. Tommy's prints were on the handle, yes. But they're smooth placements, not grip marks. Like someone pressed his hand around it afterward. Eleanor sat up, fully awake now. Can your contact testify? That's why I'm calling. He just called me, panicked. Evidence has gone missing from the lab, and someone broke into his apartment tonight. The conspiracy was widening. Someone was manipulating evidence, silencing witnesses, and controlling the narrative. But who would go to such lengths to frame a 9-year-old boy? And why? What Eleanor didn't yet realize was that the unidentified man who had entered Veronica's house was someone Tommy knew well, someone he had a special name for in his drawings. The man with the wolf smile. The courthouse was packed for Tommy's preliminary hearing. Eleanor slid into a seat beside Robert, who clutched a manila envelope tightly. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. "I found these at Veronica's house," he whispered, showing Eleanor family photos inside the envelope. "Look at the difference." The pictures told a silent, disturbing story. Photos from a year ago showed Veronica, vibrant, smiling, confident. More recent images revealed a different woman, thinner, tense, with haunted eyes that darted sideways as if watching for something just out of frame. "She was scared," Robert said. "I asked her what was wrong, but she'd just say work stress. I should have pushed harder." "You think it's connected to what she found at Westfield?" "She mentioned once that Tommy's father might cause problems someday." Robert's voice dropped further. "Veronica never told anyone who he was, not even me." The courtroom fell silent. As Tommy entered, flanked by officers, the boy looked smaller than before, his movements mechanical. When his gaze found Robert, a flicker of emotion crossed his face before disappearing behind the blank mask. Eleanor studied Judge Williams on the bench, a stern woman with connections to Governor Phillips, according to her research. The prosecutor presented the case confidently, while defense attorney Logan Peters offered only token objections. When Peters failed to raise the timeline discrepancy, Robert tensed beside Eleanor. "He's not even trying." After the hearing, Eleanor waited in the parking lot until Sheriff Caldwell emerged. She'd been digging into his background, 20 years on the Millbrook force, but before that, head of security for Westfield Industries. "Sheriff, can you comment on your previous employment with Harrison Westfield?" Caldwell froze. "What's that got to do with anything?" "Just establishing connections, like how you questioned Tommy for 6 hours without counsel or recording. That's procedure for a frightened 9-year-old? Or is that how Westfield handled problems when you worked security?" Caldwell's face hardened. "You're fishing in empty waters, Walsh. Then why alter the time of death? Why ignore the security footage showing an unknown visitor?" "You should be careful," he said, stepping closer. "Stories like this can damage more than just careers." That evening, Eleanor carefully examined Veronica's bedroom, which Robert had gained access to through a temporary court order. The space felt suspended in time, clothes still draped over a chair, reading glasses on the nightstand. "Veronica always kept a journal," Robert said, "since we were kids." They searched methodically until Eleanor spotted it, a leather-bound book, hidden beneath the mattress. Inside, page after page of coded entries, numbers, letters, and symbols that made no immediate sense. On the final page, a clear message: "If they find this, it's already too late." Below it, a child's drawing was taped carefully. In crayon, it showed a man in a suit with unnaturally sharp teeth and cold eyes. In a child's unsteady handwriting, "Mom says don't talk to the wolf man when he comes." Eleanor felt a chill. Tommy knew. He knew someone dangerous was visiting his mother. "But who is the wolf man?" Robert asked. Before Eleanor could answer, her phone buzzed. With a text from David. "Emergency, check your email now." The attachment was a police file, the unredacted confession transcript. As Eleanor read, horror washed over her. The so-called confession wasn't just coerced. It was practically dictated to Tommy, question by leading question, and one name kept appearing in the margins, where an officer had made notes about phone calls received during the interrogation. HW called for update. Harrison Westfield had been monitoring Tommy's questioning from the very beginning. Eleanor spread Veronica's journal across her dining table, examining the coded entries. Her colleague David Chen arrived with coffee and expertise. Years of investigating financial crimes had given him an eye for patterns. "It's a simple substitution cipher," he said, after studying several pages. Veronica was documenting wire transfers, large ones. His finger traced sequence. These are account numbers and these are dates, all within the last year. Together, they decoded enough to understand Westfield Industries was moving millions through offshore accounts, then back to entities labeled only as campaign support and state contract approval. "Money laundering," Eleanor whispered. "Westfield was buying government contracts and paying off officials. And Veronica was documenting everything," David added grimly. As an accountant, she would have recognized the illegal pattern. Later that day, Eleanor met Dr. Mitchell in the same coffee shop as before, 2 towns over. The psychiatrist looked worse, unshaven, eyes darting nervously. "I've been removed from Tommy's case," he said, voice low. "But I needed to tell you. The psychological evaluation they're using in court isn't mine." "What do you mean?" "My report stated Tommy showed signs of coaching and coercion, not psychopathy." He slid a folder across the table. "This is my original evaluation. The court has a different version with my forged signature." Eleanor examined the document. "This says Tommy was displaying signs of trauma, not guilt." "Exactly. His confession contains details he couldn't possibly know unless someone told him what to say." Dr. Mitchell leaned forward. "When I interviewed him alone, he would only repeat, 'I have to say I did it or bad things will happen.' He's protecting someone. Or afraid of someone," Eleanor added, thinking of the Wolfman. Drawing. "They're trying to have Tommy declared mentally incompetent and committed to a state institution. Once that happens, he'll disappear into the system. Why go to such lengths to frame a child?" Dr. Mitchell's expression darkened. "Ask yourself who benefits if Tommy takes the fall. Who's protected by making everyone believe a 9-year-old boy committed this crime?" Eleanor tried to visit Tommy the next day, armed with a press request. The Juvenile Detention Center supervisor denied access, citing a new court order restricting all visitors except legal counsel. That night, Eleanor returned to her apartment to find the door slightly ajar. Heart pounding, she pushed it open to discover her home had been searched, papers scattered, drawers emptied. Her laptop and recorder were missing, along with her notes on the case. But the intruders had made a mistake. Eleanor kept her most crucial evidence in a hidden safe: the original journal, Dr. Mitchell's report, and the decoded financial records were untouched. On her kitchen table lay her own notepad, a message written in her pen: "Wolves hunt in packs." Her phone rang. "David, I've been looking into those offshore accounts," he said without preamble. "They connect to more than just Westfield. I've found links to Governor Phillips' last campaign and several state officials. How high does this go?" "High enough that we need to be extremely careful. These people—" The line suddenly went dead. When Eleanor tried calling back, the call went straight to voicemail. She was putting her phone down when it buzzed with an incoming email. The sender was anonymous, but the subject line made her blood run cold. What Veronica Pearson discovered. Attached was an audio file, a child's voice, frightened and confused, being systematically coached to confess to a crime he didn't commit. And in the background, giving instructions to the interrogators, a voice Eleanor recognized from television appearances and charity event speeches. Harrison Westfield himself was directing Tommy's confession. Eleanor couldn't sleep. The audio file played on repeat in her mind. Tommy's frightened voice, the leading questions, Westfield's commands in the background. By morning, she had a plan. She met David at a diner outside town. He looked over his shoulder constantly, voice barely above a whisper. "I've been digging into Westfield's background," he said, sliding a folder to her. "He's not just a businessman, he's a kingmaker. His company donated 3 times the legal limit to Governor Phillips's campaign through various shell companies." Eleanor flipped through the documents. "How did you get these?" "A former Westfield employee contacted me after seeing your article about Tommy's case. She says Veronica had compiled a complete dossier on the corruption before her death. The employee doesn't have it, but confirmed its existence." Outside the diner's window, a sedan with tinted windows drove slowly past. David tensed. "I'm being followed," he muttered. "Since yesterday." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "We need to be careful. These people have already killed once." Later that day, Eleanor visited Tommy's school again, hoping to speak with his classmates. In the art room, Mrs. Harmon showed her recent projects. "The children made cards for Tommy," she explained, revealing colorful drawings with messages like, "We miss you," and "Come back soon." A small girl approached, holding a folded paper. "Are you the lady helping Tommy?" Eleanor knelt to eye level. "I'm trying to. Did you know him well?" The girl nodded solemnly. "We sat together at lunch. The day before his mom. He told me she was going to fix things, and then they might move away." Did he say anything else? The girl hesitated, then opened her drawing, a playground scene with stick figures. In the corner lurked a suited figure with pointed teeth. Tommy always drew him in the background, said he was the man with the wolf smile who made his mom scared. Eleanor carefully photographed the drawing, her hands trembling slightly. Driving back to her apartment, she noticed a car following at a discreet distance. Instead of going home, she drove to the public library, losing the tail by exiting through a side door. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Dr. Albert Morris, the medical examiner who performed Veronica's autopsy, had taken an unexpected leave of absence for health reasons. The same medical examiner who had changed the time of death to implicate Tommy. Eleanor called his office, posing as a relative, and learned he'd checked into a private rehabilitation facility the day after amending his report. Back home, she pulled up Harrison Westfield's public appearances, searching for connections. A charity. A photo showed him with the governor, Sheriff Caldwell, and Judge Williams, all smiling for the camera. Another image captured Westfield receiving an award, the district attorney applauding in the background. The pieces were falling into place. Not just corruption, but a network of power and influence protecting itself. Eleanor's doorbell rang unexpectedly. Heart pounding, she peered through the peephole to see a courier holding a package. After he left, she cautiously opened it to find a USB drive wrapped in a note. Partial audio of the confession. Source inside Sheriff's Department. Be careful. The recording was damning. Sheriff Caldwell repeatedly feeding Tommy details only the killer could know, then coaching the boy to repeat them back as his own recollection. Tell me about the kitchen knife, Tommy. I don't know. The big one with the black handle from the wooden block. Remember? A small, confused voice. The big one with the black handle? That's right, and you took it from the kitchen, didn't you? Silence, then a barely audible, yes. Eleanor's hands shook as she prepared her first major article exposing the inconsistencies and manipulation. She knew publishing it would bring the full force of Westfield's influence against her. But Tommy's frightened voice drove her forward. What she didn't know was that her article would trigger not just public outrage, but panic among the conspirators, and their desperate measures would soon force Eleanor herself into hiding. Eleanor's article exploded across the Tribune's front page. Confession or coercion. Evidence suggests manipulation in Cannibal Boy case. The piece methodically detailed the timeline discrepancies, the edited confession, and the web of connections between key officials handling the case. Within hours, local television stations picked up the story. By noon, national outlets were calling. Eleanor's phone wouldn't stop ringing. At first, the public response seemed promising. Online forums buzzed with outrage. A small group of protesters gathered outside the courthouse with "Justice for Tommy" signs. Then came the backlash. The Tribune's publisher called Eleanor to his office, his expression grave. The governor's office just called. They're threatening a lawsuit for defamation. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, Eleanor replied. They're also suggesting our access to state events could be reconsidered, and 3 major advertisers have pulled their accounts. So we're backing down? We're putting you on administrative leave while we review your methods, effective immediately. Eleanor stared at him in disbelief. You're firing me for doing my job? I'm protecting the paper. He couldn't meet her eyes. Security will escort you out. Don't speak to anyone on your way. Outside, Eleanor sat in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel. Her career was collapsing, but that seemed trivial compared to what was at stake. She called Robert. Did you see it? She asked when he answered. Everyone did. It's working, Eleanor. People are asking questions. I've been suspended. Robert was silent for a moment. They're closing ranks. Listen, I've been searching Veronica's house again. Found something in her bedroom, a hidden camera. Someone was monitoring her. The Wolfman. Whoever he is, he must have known she was gathering evidence. Later that evening, Eleanor worked from her apartment, continuing the investigation despite her suspension. Her landline rang, an unlisted number. My name is Sarah, a woman's voice said cautiously. I was Dr. Mitchell's assistant. He wanted me to call you. Where is he? I've been trying to reach him. They've removed him from Tommy's case completely. Claimed unprofessional conduct. He's being investigated by the medical board. Sarah's voice trembled. He told me to tell you they're moving Tommy tomorrow morning to a psychiatric facility upstate. They can't do that without a hearing. Judge Williams signed the order today. Emergency basis. Once he's transferred, you'll never get access to him. Eleanor thanked her and hung up, mind racing. Tommy was being systematically isolated. Every potential ally removed. Dr. Mitchell discredited. Eleanor herself suspended. Robert blocked from custody. She tried calling David Chen, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Again, her worry deepened. As darkness fell, Eleanor's phone lit. Up with a text from an unknown number. Check the basement at Westfield's hunting cabin. She stared at the cryptic message, wondering if it was a trap, but she'd recognized the number. The last 4 digits matched the extension for Melissa, Veronica's co-worker from accounting. Eleanor called. Robert immediately. We need to find Westfield's hunting property. Why? Because I think that's where Veronica was actually killed. As they spoke, Eleanor noticed a dark sedan parking across from her apartment building. 2 men in suits emerged, one speaking into a radio. Robert, I need to go. I think they're coming for me. She grabbed her laptop, the USB drives, and Veronica's journal, stuffing them into a backpack. As she slipped out the back entrance of her building, she heard pounding on her apartment door. The hunt had begun, not just for the truth, but for Eleanor herself. And, somewhere in a hunting cabin's basement, lay evidence that could bring down not just Harrison Westfield, but an entire network of corruption that reached to the highest levels of state government. Eleanor met Robert at a 24-hour diner 30 miles outside Millbrook, her hands still shaking as she clutched her coffee. The television above the counter played a late news broadcast. Harrison Westfield denouncing irresponsible journalism and attacks on a grieving community. How do we find his hunting cabin? She asked. Robert slid his phone across the table. Tax records. Westfield owns 3 properties outside his main residence. 2 are rental investments in Columbus. The third is 220 acres in Hocking County, listed as recreational property. An hour later, they approached the turnoff to Westfield's land, a narrow gravel road winding into dense woods. Robert killed the EI headlights, using only moonlight to guide them the final quarter mile. The cabin was impressive for a hunting retreat, a 2-story structure with a wraparound porch and detached garage. No vehicles present, no lights visible. Security cameras, Eleanor whispered, pointing to small devices, mounted at the corners. Probably motion activated. We'll have to risk it. They circled to the rear, finding a cellar entrance. Robert produced a small toolkit from his pocket. Locksmith for 15 years, he explained, working on the padlock. Veronica always called me when she locked herself. Out. Inside, they used flashlights sparingly, sweeping the beams across concrete floors and wood-paneled walls. The basement was immaculately clean, unnaturally so. Too clean, Eleanor murmured, running a finger along a workbench. Like it's been scrubbed. Robert crouched near a drain in the floor. Look at this. He pointed to faint reddish-brown stains in the grout lines. Someone tried to wash something down this drain. Eleanor took samples in a tissue, sealing it in a plastic bag. Near the stairs, she noticed subtle discoloration on the concrete, the ghostly outline of furniture. Recently moved. They cleaned up in a hurry, she said. Professional but rushed. As they carefully documented the scene with photos, Robert's flashlight caught something wedged between the wall and a shelf, a small gold earring with a broken clasp. This is Veronica's, he said, voice breaking. Our grandmother's design. Veronica wore them every day. Outside, they checked the nearby gas station's security camera, persuading the night attendant to show them footage from the day of Veronica's murder. At 1:47 p.m., a familiar black sedan passed heading toward the cabin. At 4:23 p.m., the same car returned toward Millbrook. That's Westfield's car, Eleanor confirmed, comparing it to photos on her phone. And this timeline matches the original autopsy report, before they changed it. Back in Robert's car, Eleanor felt the pieces aligning. Westfield killed Veronica here, then staged the scene at her house. They needed Tommy to take the blame, so they manipulated evidence and forced a confession. But why? Why not just make it look like a robbery gone wrong or an accident? Because they needed something so shocking, so horrific that no one would look past the headlines. Eleanor's voice hardened. They created a monster myth, the cannibal boy, knowing the public would be too disgusted to question it. They drove in silence toward Millbrook, planning to take their evidence to the district attorney in the neighboring county, someone outside Westfield's immediate influence. Eleanor's phone buzzed with a news alert. Governor Phillips announces special prosecutor to review controversial murder case. They're feeling the pressure, she said. Public opinion is shifting. What they didn't know was that Sheriff Caldwell had already ordered the destruction of all original crime scene photos from Veronica's house, photos that would have revealed staging inconsistent with Tommy's confession. As they approached the town limits, Robert suddenly slowed the car. "Eleanor, we need to be smart about this. If they're watching my sister's house and your apartment, they're probably watching you too," she realized. "We need somewhere safe to compile everything. And we need to move fast before Tommy's transfer tomorrow." Eleanor stared out the window at the passing darkness. "I know someone who might help, but first, I need to see Tommy's drawings again. All of them. The Wolfman is the key to everything." Robert nodded grimly. "Mrs. Harmon keeps student artwork in her classroom, but the school will be locked at this hour." "Not a problem," Eleanor replied, thinking of her early years as an investigative reporter. Some skills you never forget. What they would find in Tommy's art portfolio would change everything they thought they knew about the case, and reveal a direct connection between Harrison Westfield and the Pearson family that no one had suspected. Oakwood Elementary stood silent under the moonlight, empty corridors stretching dark and quiet. Eleanor's lockpicking skills hadn't dulled, a forgotten talent from her early investigative days that now proved invaluable. They slipped inside, footsteps echoing softly on polished floors. Mrs. Harmon's classroom felt smaller at night. Robert stood watch at the door while Eleanor rifled through the art storage cabinet, finding a portfolio labeled Tommy P. "Got it," she whispered. They spread the drawings on a table under the dim glow of a flashlight. Most were typical child's artwork: houses with smoking chimneys, stick figure families, bright suns with radiating lines. But scattered throughout were recurring images of the Wolfman, a tall figure in a suit, with an unnaturally wide smile full of sharp teeth. In one drawing, labeled Mom's Work Friend, the Wolfman stood beside a woman with red hair like Veronica's. Another showed him watching a house from a car. The final drawing made Eleanor's breath catch. It depicted what appeared to be a family portrait: Tommy, Veronica, and the Wolfman together, holding hands. "He knew him," Eleanor murmured. "The Wolfman wasn't just watching them. He was part of their lives." Robert studied the drawing, face pale. "These teeth, it's not literal. It's how a child perceives a threatening smile. False, predatory. We need to show Tommy these drawings," Eleanor decided. "He's the only one who can tell us who this really is." The juvenile detention center was their next stop. Eleanor had contacted a sympathetic night nurse who owed her a favor from a previous story. 5 minutes with Tommy off the record. They found the boy curled on his bed, smaller than Eleanor remembered. When he saw Robert, his eyes filled with tears. "Uncle Rob," he whispered. Robert embraced him, fighting back his own emotion. "Tommy, we need to ask you about your drawings, about the Wolfman." Tommy's face closed immediately, eyes darting to the door. "I'm not supposed to talk about him." "It's okay," Eleanor said gently. "We want to help you. Was the Wolfman someone who visited your mom?" Tommy nodded slightly. "Was he at your house the day your mom—" Eleanor couldn't finish. "He said I have to say I did it," Tommy whispered, "or they'll hurt Uncle Rob too. He said no one would believe me anyway because I'm just a kid." "Who is he, Tommy?" Robert asked, voice breaking. Before Tommy could answer, the door opened. The nurse signaled urgently. "Time up." As they were leaving, Tommy grabbed Eleanor's sleeve. "He has a special pin," the boy whispered hurriedly. "A wolf head. He always wears it." Outside, Eleanor and Robert processed this new information. "A wolf pin," Eleanor repeated. "That could identify him." Her phone buzzed. A news notification. Governor Phillips announces Special Prosecutor Amanda Hayes to review controversial child murder case. This could be good, Robert said cautiously. Maybe, Eleanor replied, if she's actually independent. Back at their temporary hideout, a motel room, paid for in cash, Eleanor received an unexpected package from a courier. Inside was a thumb drive with a note from Uncle Robert. Veronica sent this the week before she died. For safekeeping, I didn't understand its importance until now. The drive contained audio recordings, conversations between Harrison Westfield and Governor Phillips discussing taking care of the problem and making sure the records disappear. Most damning was a mention of Veronica getting too close to the adoption records. Adoption records? Eleanor looked at Robert questioningly. I don't understand, he said. Tommy wasn't adopted. He's Veronica's biological son. Eleanor's mind raced. Maybe it's not about Tommy's adoption. Maybe it's about other adoptions. She began researching Westfield Industries' charitable foundation, discovering it had founded 3 private adoption agencies across the state, agencies that received substantial government funding through contracts approved by Governor Phillips's administration. What if the money laundering Veronica discovered was connected to these agencies? Eleanor theorized. What if the corruption wasn't just about government contracts, but something worse? As dawn broke, Eleanor's phone rang. David Chen, finally. Eleanor, I've found something big, he said without preamble. Really big, but I can't talk over the phone. Meet me at the usual place in an hour. What David had discovered would reveal not just who the Wolfman was, but a conspiracy far darker than financial corruption. One involving the trafficking of children through a network of fraudulent adoptions, with Westfield Industries at its center. And at its heart stood a terrible truth. The real reason Veronica Pearson had to die. The psychiatric facility where Tommy had been transferred loomed gray and institutional against the morning sky. Eleanor had convinced Robert to seek visitation while she met with David, arguing they needed to work both angles simultaneously. Using her press credentials from a different newspaper, Eleanor gained access to see Tommy, under the guise of an approved human interest story. The supervising psychiatrist, Dr. Neely, watched from across the room. Tommy looked different, his movements sluggish, eyes unfocused. When he saw Eleanor, recognition flickered briefly before fading. Tommy, do you remember me? Eleanor? He nodded slowly. The lady helping Uncle Rob. How are you feeling? Tired. They give me medicine. His speech was slightly slurred. Makes the bad dreams go away. Eleanor glanced at his chart, noting a powerful antipsychotic medication not typically prescribed for children. Tommy, I need to ask you about the Wolfman again. Tommy's gaze darted nervously to Dr. Neely, then back. He made me say I hurt Mom, he whispered. But I didn't. I was at school. The Wolfman made me say it. Who is he, Tommy? Do you know his name? Tommy leaned closer, his voice barely audible. He's Mom's boss. The one with the fancy cars. Before Eleanor could ask more, Dr. Neely approached. That's enough for today. Tommy needs his rest. Outside, Eleanor researched the facility, discovering it received substantial funding from a charitable foundation connected to Westfield Industries. The pieces were aligning too perfectly to be coincidence. She drove to meet David at their designated spot, a public park halfway between Millbrook and Columbus. But after waiting 30 minutes, he hadn't arrived. His phone went straight to voicemail. Back in her car, Eleanor called a contact at David's newspaper. He hasn't been in for 2 days, the woman said worriedly. Missed a staff meeting yesterday. That's not like him. A knot formed in Eleanor's stomach. David had uncovered something significant. Something worth silencing him for. Her phone rang. Robert. I just met with a forensic audio expert, he said breathlessly. He confirmed the confession recording was edited. There are subtle cuts throughout, places where Tommy's responses were manipulated. Good. We need all the evidence we can get. David's missing. Missing? Eleanor, this is getting dangerous. After hanging up, Eleanor noticed a new email from an anonymous sender. The subject line, What happened to David Chen? The message contained a single line, Back off, or you're next. Attached was a photo of David's car, abandoned on a rural road, driver's door open. Fear and anger competed in Eleanor's mind. She forwarded the email to her editor and a trusted colleague at a national paper. Insurance, in case something happened to her. Her next stop was the county medical examiner's office. Through a nurse contact, she'd learned that Dr. Morris, the ME who'd changed Veronica's time of death, had checked into a rehabilitation facility for alcohol dependency the day after altering his report. The facility was private, expensive, and, Eleanor discovered, fully paid for by an anonymous benefactor. Using her press badge and considerable persuasion, she gained 5 minutes with Dr. Morris. The man looked haggard, haunted. "I know you changed the time of death," Eleanor said without preamble. "I know you were pressured." Morris stared at the floor. "You have no idea what they're capable of." "Who? Westfield?" "All of them. The whole network." His hands trembled. "They said they'd take my license, that my daughter would lose her scholarship, that accidents happen to people who don't cooperate. Tell me the truth. When did Veronica Pearson really die?" "Between 2 and 4 p.m., like my original report said, when the boy was still at school." Morris looked up, eyes hollow. "I've spent my career serving truth. One lie and everything I built is gone." As Eleanor left, her phone buzzed with a news alert. A new witness had come forward, claiming to have seen Tommy returning home from school early on the day of the murder. But when Eleanor checked the school attendance records again, they confirmed Tommy was present all day. Another fabrication, another attempt to bolster the false narrative. Back at the motel, Eleanor received a call from her toxicologist contact. "I found something in Veronica's blood work that wasn't in the official report," the woman said. "A benzodiazepine compound. She was drugged before death, likely unconscious when the fatal wounds were inflicted." This directly contradicted the prosecution's claim of a struggle between Tommy and his mother. The case against the boy was unraveling thread by thread. Eleanor's phone buzzed again. A text from Robert. "Tommy collapsed after our visit. They've restricted all access, claiming medical emergency." The conspiracy was accelerating its timeline, isolating Tommy completely. And somewhere, the Wolfman was watching, his razor smile hidden behind a respectable public face. Eleanor's article on the toxicology findings hit the internet like wildfire. Murder victim drugged. New evidence contradicts official narrative in Cannibal Boy case. Even without the Tribune's platform, her personal blog reached thousands within hours, shared across social media by concerned citizens and picked up by national outlets. Public opinion was shifting dramatically. Hashtags demanding justice for Tommy trended nationwide. The governor's office released a terse statement. "We are monitoring the situation closely." Eleanor knew they were doing far more than monitoring. That afternoon, a press conference was hastily arranged. Governor Phillips announced Harrison Westfield's appointment to a federal commerce commission, a position that would require him to relocate to Washington immediately. "They're getting him out of the state," Robert said when Eleanor called him with the news. "Creating distance before everything collapses, or putting him beyond local jurisdiction," Eleanor countered grimly. Hours later, Sheriff Caldwell held his own press conference, unveiling new evidence, a video supposedly showing Tommy practicing his confession before police questioning began. In the grainy footage, Tommy appeared to rehearse details of the crime with chilling precision. Eleanor immediately contacted a digital forensics specialist from her network of sources. After examining the video, he confirmed her suspicions. "It's a deepfake," he explained. "Sophisticated but detectable. They've manipulated existing footage of the boy, adding new audio and subtly altering mouth movements. Most viewers wouldn't notice the inconsistencies without specialized software." Despite these revelations, Tommy's case was being fast-tracked. His defense attorney, Logan Peters, announced he was negotiating a plea deal that would avoid trial in exchange for commitment to a psychiatric institution until adulthood. "He's selling Tommy out," Robert raged. "This can't be legal." "It's not about legality anymore," Eleanor replied. "It's about power." Following a hunch, Eleanor began investigating Peters. Discovering that his small legal practice had recently received a substantial payment from a subsidiary of Westfield Industries, supposedly for consulting services. Meanwhile, David Chen remained missing. Police had found his abandoned car, but claimed insufficient evidence of foul play. Probably just took off, an officer told Eleanor dismissively. People do that sometimes when they're under pressure. Eleanor knew better. David wouldn't abandon an investigation this important. Something had happened to him. Something connected to whatever he'd discovered about Westfield. That evening, Eleanor received an unexpected call from Amanda Hayes, the special prosecutor appointed to review the case. "Ms. Walsh, I've been examining your claims," Hayes said, her tone professionally neutral. "Some of the discrepancies you've identified are concerning. Enough to stop Tommy's plea deal? That's not within my immediate authority, but I'd like to meet off the record." They arranged to meet the following morning at a coffee shop in Columbus, neutral territory. Eleanor felt a flutter of hope. Perhaps Hayes was actually independent, not another piece. On Westfield's chessboard. As Eleanor prepared for bed in her motel room, her phone chimed with an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line froze her blood. Tommy's father. The message contained only a photo, an old newspaper clipping showing a younger Harrison Westfield at a company event. Beside him stood Veronica Pearson, visibly pregnant. The caption read, "Westfield Industries CEO celebrates expansion with staff 2014, 9 months before Tommy's birth." Eleanor stared at the image, the final piece clicking into place. The Wolfman wasn't just Veronica's boss, he was Tommy's biological father. And he had orchestrated an elaborate conspiracy to frame his own son for murder, rather than let Veronica expose their connection, and whatever darker secrets lay behind it. What Eleanor didn't know was that someone else had reached the same conclusion, someone who had been silently tracking the case from the beginning, gathering evidence for their own purposes, someone who would soon change everything. Eleanor raced against time, compiling all evidence before Tommy's plea hearing. She'd confirmed that Harrison Westfield was not only Tommy's biological father, but had maintained secret contact with Veronica over the years. The adoption agencies Westfield funded were the key. Veronica had discovered they were falsifying records, placing children with wealthy donors while diverting state funds. Meeting with Special Prosecutor Hayes felt promising until Eleanor noticed the wolf head pin on Hayes's lapel, identical to the one Tommy had described. Hayes wasn't an independent investigator. She was part of Westfield's inner circle. Eleanor feigned ignorance through their conversation, then hurried to meet the original medical examiner who'd been pressured to change his report. He agreed to sign an affidavit confirming the coercion. As she left his office, 2 police cars intercepted her. "Eleanor Walsh, you're being detained for questioning regarding interference with an official investigation." At the station, they confiscated her phone and evidence. Files. No formal charges, just hours of intimidation tactics. Meanwhile, Robert discovered a hidden folder in Veronica's cloud storage containing photos of Westfield leaving their house days before the murder. Eleanor was eventually released thanks to her newspaper threatening legal action. But the delay had cost her precious time. Tommy's hearing was hours away, and his fate seemed sealed. Eleanor returned to her apartment to find it ransacked, her laptop stolen. The warning was clear. Back off or worse would follow. Instead, she called her editor and former colleagues, sharing everything she knew. If something happened to her, the story would still break. Detective Marcus Collins, originally assigned to Veronica's case before Caldwell took over, contacted Eleanor secretly. "I was removed after questioning the rush to judgment," he explained. "Something felt wrong from the beginning." Together, they located the unedited confession video showing Tommy being threatened and coached. Eleanor sent copies to every major news outlet and trusted journalist in her network. National attention exploded overnight. The hashtag #JusticeForTommy trended nationwide. Governor Phillips announced an emergency press conference while the special prosecutor suddenly withdrew the plea deal, citing new developments. Robert called with news that Tommy had been hospitalized after collapsing in custody, another suspicious timing. Medical tests revealed unauthorized sedatives in his system. As Iowa public pressure mounted, Eleanor received a chilling message. You've won, but you won't live to tell the story. Minutes later, her phone rang, Harrison Westfield himself, requesting a private meeting to share the truth. Despite the obvious danger, Eleanor agreed. This was her chance to hear a confession from the Wolfman himself. The meeting took place at Westfield's office, cameras deliberately disabled. Eleanor brought a hidden recorder, her last insurance policy. "You're remarkably persistent, Ms. Walsh," Westfield said, his smile revealing the predator beneath the polished exterior. "But you've misunderstood everything." "Enlighten me," Eleanor replied coolly. "Veronica and I had an arrangement. She received generous support for Tommy. In return, she managed certain financial transactions discreetly." His expression hardened. "Until she developed a conscience and threatened to expose not just me, but Governor Phillips and half the state administration. So you killed her." "I merely protected my interests. The boy was an unfortunate complication, his mother's insurance policy. She'd taught him enough to be dangerous." What Westfield didn't know was that Detective Collins was recording everything from the adjacent room. As Westfield detailed the conspiracy, the falsified adoption records, the laundered money, the networked officials, his confession was being transmitted to federal authorities who had been quietly building their own case. When FBI agents burst in to arrest Westfield, his composed facade finally cracked. "Truth is what we say it is," he snarled at Eleanor. "Always has been." In the aftermath, Tommy was cleared of all charges and placed in Robert's custody. The conspiracy unraveled spectacularly, though with calculated precision. Lower officials took the fall, while powerful players negotiated immunity deals. Governor Phillips resigned, citing health concerns, escaping criminal charges. Eleanor's comprehensive exposé won a Pulitzer, detailing how a system meant to protect the vulnerable had become a weapon against them. Tommy began the long journey of healing, his artwork now free of lurking wolfmen. The final justice was imperfect. Some perpetrators became convenient scapegoats while others escaped unscathed. The machinery that had nearly destroyed an innocent child hadn't failed. It had functioned exactly as designed, protecting power at all costs. As Eleanor wrote in her final piece, "The most terrifying revelation isn't what happened to one family in Millbrook, but how easily truth becomes whatever those in power declare it to be."